JavaScript. Very briefly, I'm going to throw a quick line of CSS in here. Maybe instead of this thing taking up absolutely the entire width, let's target that main element and give it a width of 80% and a margin of 1 rim space auto. Anybody know what that means? So margin is the space around an element. There's a margin top property, there's a margin right property, there's a margin bottom property, etc. Or you can combine them into a single one. And if you do, it goes in this order: top, right, bottom, left. Margin top comes first, then right, then bottom, then left. If you don't specify bottom and left, they will be the same as top and right. So this puts 1 rim of margin at the top and bottom, and auto on the left and right. Anybody know what auto margin on the left and right does? Very handy thing to know. Yeah, Jacob? It does make it so that they're the same. So what does that mean? They're centered, right? Yeah. So auto will make it centered. There we go. So our JavaScript. Last time our code felt a little disorganized, and everything we did was in the global scope. All of those functions I could have just run from the console anytime. And for a project that size, it really didn't matter, but it's a bad habit to get in. If you start importing third-party libraries and stuff, what if they use the same variable name you did somewhere? Well, that's going to be a problem. And while it's unlikely that a library would name something render list item, you're not going to be totally clever in all your function names all the time. And we had one called handle submit, for heaven's sake. That's not that unusual. So we want to avoid polluting the global scope as much as we can. So this time, we're going to put everything inside an object. We're going to put all our code inside one object. So we're only going to have one global variable, and we're going to call it app. Const app. And it's an object. So for a moment here, you don't need to copy this down. I'm just demonstrating something. So we know with objects, you have keys and values, right? The values could be strings. Values could be an array. Could the value be another object? Yeah, sure, why not? Carnivores, you dope. Carnivores, man alive. Could the value be a function? Why the heck not? We've been passing around functions as arguments to other functions. Why couldn't it be the value of an object property? Just put an anonymous function there on the right side. Notice how I'm always putting my comma in there before I forget. It's just almost automatic under my fingers now. If that worked, how would I run it? How do I get my list of dinos there? I could say app.dinos, right? Sure, let's refresh this page. App.dinos. There we go. How can I run my function? I can't just type say yeah. App.say yeah. Yeah. That's right. You can totally do that. We have a special name for functions that happen to be properties of objects. Anybody know what that is? You nodding back there, Christina? Christine? Just 2 syllables. Were you nodding? You just rocking to the beat? Okay. Okay. Don't stop rocking, can't stop. Wow. Anybody know what we call functions that happen to be properties of objects? I almost said it. Starts with an M. Method. That's right. Heard that before? So, a function that happens to be a property of an object is called a method. And methods are a little different in some special ways that we'll see here in a bit. But anytime you're getting to something by saying dot that thing's a method. I've used that word a couple of times when talking about some of the DOM methods. I've been trying to say function, but now you know the rest of the story. So that's a bit about objects and methods. So we're going to put everything now inside there. So we know we need to add some things to a list, but that's a little overwhelming. Let's just start simple here. To bake an apple pie from scratch, first you must create the universe. So before we can add things to a list when a form is submitted, we need to listen for that form to be submitted, right? If you don't know how to do the whole thing, do the part you know. So we need to start listening for that. How do we do that? Well, before we can listen for an event on the form, we have to get the form, right? That's right. So get the form with query selector, then add an event listener to it, right? So we need to put this inside some sort of method on app. Because I'm telling you, we need to put all our code inside methods now. We're not going to put any new functions in the global scope. When do we want to start listening for that form submission? Just as soon as we load the page, right? Right away, we want to start listening for it to be submitted. So how about I just make a method that's going to run as soon as the page loads? I'll call it init. We'll think of it kind of like a constructor. Don't forget my comma. Now, right now, that thing's never going to get run. So before I even put any code in there, because I will totally forget this otherwise, I'm going to go down here to the bottom, and I'm going to run it. So app.init. So now whatever I write in there is going to run as soon as the page loads. And now I don't plan to really put anything else outside these curly braces again, unless I need to modify that call to app.init. So what are we going to do here? We're going to use a query selector to grab the form, right? Document.querySelector. I think I gave it an ID of flick form, right? I'm not going to bother saving this to a variable. I just kind of want to chain add event listener on the end of this. How about that? Can we do that? Why the heck not? But that line of code is now really, really long. I pointed out in some of my slides the other day, you can totally put line breaks before the dots, and it works. So I'm going to put line breaks and indent like this. When I chain together multiple function calls, I like to do this. I think it makes it a lot more readable when it's all said and done. Besides saving you from lots of scrolling to the left and right, it's easy to miss all the function calls that are happening on a line if you have a bunch of them. So let's do it like this. We'll select the thing, and then we'll add the event listener to it. While we're working on organizing our code all nicely and neatly, what if our init method didn't need to know what that selector is? What if we could just pass the selector in as an argument to that? Here's what I mean. When I call init, I pass in the name of the form. And the init method gets it that way. That way I could actually call init more than once with more than one form. Why not? So then I need to give the argument a name here. Let's call it form selector. Then we'll say document.querySelector, form selector. Make sense? Just cleans it up a little. Now, never mind the fact that eventually this is going to add something to a list. Let's just see if we can get any kind of event listener to run, because that seems like it might be a chore in and of itself, now that we're getting all tricky with methods and stuff. What are we listening for? What event? Is it a click? Submit, right? And then we need to tell it a function to run. So let's write another function. And because this is what we're doing now, we're going to write a method. So let's give our app object another method called handleSubmit. We'll just put it down here. Like any other object, it has a key, colon, and then a value. And the value just happens to be a function. And because I'm in the habit, I'm going to go ahead and put my trailing comma there so I don't forget it next time. And what do we know about functions that are getting run as event handlers? They always get an argument, right? Whether we ask for it or not, an event object is always going to be passed in. So let's go ahead and ask for it. And since this is a form submission, we have to do something extra, right? What do we have to do? Otherwise, bad things will happen. Yeah, we need to prevent default. Otherwise, the page will refresh before we have a chance to do anything else. So we'll say ev.preventDefault. And then for right now, I'm just going to say console log submitted, so that we can prove that we at least got this thing to run. So handleSubmit should be the second argument to add event listener, right? How do I do that? Can I just say handleSubmit? See what happens if I do. Uncut reference error. handleSubmit is not defined on line 5. Nope. How do I call it? Well, I don't call it. How do I pass it? This dot handleSubmit. You might have been tempted to say app.handleSubmit. Would have worked. Totally would have worked. But I don't want the object to need to know what variable it was assigned to. The object needs a way to refer to itself. And thankfully, there is such a thing built in. And that is this. So right now, this seems like a very handy thing. You're going to learn to hate it. But right at the moment, it seems very, very handy. So inside an object method, this generally refers to the object itself. So if you need to call another method on the same object, just use this. Or if you need to refer to another property that isn't a method, just use this. So this.handleSubmit. Let's see what that does. Cool, submitted. We hooked up our event listener. It'd be nice if it at least said something that came out of the form. I don't think we gave our input a name, did we? So how about we give that input a name? Name equals flick name. Flick name. And having done that, I could console log that value. How do I get the form inside here? Event.target, right? So let's say const f equals ev.target. And then how do I get the value out of flick name? Someone other than Shu? Yeah. Well, what dot value? So f is the entire form, right? Flick name, yeah. F.flickName dot value. Did it work? G.I. Joe. There. Okay. Good. That's a decent intermediate step. Set up event handler for flick form. Questions so far? I know this is a lot already. Poop's about to get crazy, y'all.